If you're looking for exclusive content, please don't look any further than joining the Trap Talk Patreon family. Some of the best reptile keepers in this industry are part of the Trap Talk Patreon family. As soon as you join the Patreon family, you connect to a Discord. You can also tap into an Instagram group chat, connect with some of the most diverse keepers we have in the reptile hobby today. Shout out to my Patreon members and be ready for Trap Fest 2026. It's going to be one of the biggest events yet. Find all information again in the very first link in the description below. And again, thank you so much to all my fellow Patreon members out there.
All right, so welcome to All Monitor Talk. I am your host, Kat. With me is my co-host, Brandon. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We don't have a guest on today. It's just going to be me and Brandon. And we're going to be talking about acclimating monitor lizards, both CB and wild caught. And then after we talk about acclimating them, then Brandon is going to, I guess, read off some questions. Why don't you tell us about that, Brandon?
Yeah, so I just posed, because we don't have a guest today, right? It's kind of that time of year, especially where we are, where it's summer and everybody wants to do something come weekends, which is totally understandable. So it's been hard to get some guests, but I let people know that we were pre-recording tonight, and on Facebook and Instagram, I just said, hey, if you have questions that you want answered, right, or if there's something you want to know, Kat and I will do our best, right? We may not be able to, but we'll do our best to answer some of these things, and hopefully we can answer some stuff to the best of our ability, and so a bunch of people had some questions online. Some of the stuff is like common stuff that we've covered before on different episodes, and they've been covered on other podcasts as well, but we'll touch on them again. And then some of the stuff has been were some new interesting things, so yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
We'll start with acclimation, because this as somebody who breeds them, and I have to sell offspring, there's like always questions I get. Somebody receives their monitors and stuff, and there's always questions. But Kat, I don't know, what do you want to start? Do you want to start with acclimating captive bred ones? Like, and when we say acclimation, really, it's like transitioning them from someone's care, a breeder's care, or whoever's hatched them, into your own sort of setup, right? So it's not like a true, it's more acclimatization than an acclimation, but it's still a change for the lizard, right? So
and it's also different too. Like, I mean, what are you trying to do? Because there's two different ways you could go. Like, one, you could be buying a monitor lizard that you want to be your pet, and you want it to be very friendly. You want it to be social and things like that. But then also, maybe you're not into that. Maybe you're more hands off, and, you're just getting this animal because you want to breed it in the future, or maybe, you just like to, look at it, So I kind of feel like the process for acclimating would be different between those two. But yeah, definitely getting a CB baby is probably the easiest thing to acclimate versus like getting wild caught or sometimes even a CB adult, because you just don't know what the history is, like how it was raised, or let's say like, what resources it had available while it was growing up. It could have issues or something. But Brandon, what do you do? We'll start with you. What do you do? Because you're not really hands-on like I am, and then I'll go into what I do.
Yeah, obviously I'm a breeder. I have a lot of animals, so it's not like I can handle everything every day, right? And give equal attention to everything. And I have a pretty busy and chaotic life to begin with, so it's like, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, and usually that excludes handling all my little friends all the time. And I truly believe that tree monitors, should probably be something that is more of an observation. But I mean, some of them become so social. They just, like, they're so smart. They want to be your friends anyways. Like, I have some of my adults, and I've never really actively worked to socialize them, let's say, right? And these are imported animals too. But I mean, when I come up and I slide the glass open, both of them are climbing out, trying to jump on me. And I mean, it's great. I don't discourage it. It's just, you know, but I also have some that are like, you know, oh God, get away from me, right? So I don't force anything that way, and it is what it is. But yeah, so I think, like, you know, like you said, for a captive bred baby, we'll start with those, right? Like a captive
Yeah.
bred. So for me, when I produce tree monitors, I mean, one of the things you want to do, and this has kind of been expressed by other keepers, is like as soon as they hatch, and you obviously have to transition them from the incubator into an enclosure or a temporary thing in the incubator, you kind of want to be as non-invasive as possible, right? Like I don't cut eggs, I don't pull things out of eggs, you know, I don't do any of that stuff. I let them hatch normally, and then when I do pull them out of the incubator, it's always very gentle, right? And, you know, no grabbing, just kind of let them walk through your hands, that sort of stuff. And, you know, you talk to someone like Cody Kopp, for instance, and he talks about how, you know, he'll, as soon as they're out of the egg, if I'm remembering correctly, he'll like handle them for a little while so they get right used to him and that sort of thing, right? So it's one of the first experiences they have, whether imprinting is a thing with tree monitors or not. I mean, I don't know about that, but definitely you're the first interaction that they have, and if it's good, right? If it's a good interaction and they feel safe and secure, or not startled and scared, then, you know, going forward, it'll be a much easier thing to socialize those babies, right? Those babies,
yeah.
they don't perceive you as a threat, versus an imported animal you got in and they've had such a traumatic experience, you know, if they were collected in the wild from being captured, then bagged, then kept at a facility until they were exported, and, you know, that's traumatic for them, and you can tell the difference between them for sure, right? So with the captive bred tree monitor babies, like, you know, they're individualistic in terms of their personalities, right? Certain ones are better than others, even within the same species. Certain clutches seem to be more social than others. Like Macrae, I have a few pairs that produce some fairly social babies right off the hop, whereas they don't fear you. And I have other ones that produce clutches that are shyer. Cordensis all seem to be really good. Black tree monitors all seem to be really good. So there is that aspect of it. But just with babies, I think one of the things that I hear, well, that I see, is like, you can't force it, right? You have to kind of let them do it on their own time, and they will come around. All of the tree monitors, even my imported ones, come around. You just have to be patient, right? I think people have the impression that it should happen overnight, right? Even if it's a captive bred baby, that it should happen overnight. Like, I expect that this thing should tongue feed and would want to run out on my hand. I mean, I don't get negative feedback like that, but like, you can tell with some of the questions that people ask me after they receive their tree monitor, it's like, oh, you know, it's afraid of me. I'm like, well, it's in a new surroundings. You're a new face, and they definitely recognize faces, right? So there is that. It will take some time. And one of the other things I get too is with like baby tree monitors, you know, I always get the question, like, people like, oh, it's not eating. It's not eating. And the first thing I ask is like, okay, you've had it for a couple weeks. Is it pooping? Yeah. Well, then it's eating. It's not eating in front of you, right?
Yeah.
So give it time. I said, if you want to feel better about knowing 100% that it is eating, do yourself a favor, right? At least with the monitors that I breed, like the tree monitors, I feed them like when they're babies, mostly crickets and stuff. But like every once in a while, I'll put a little dish of like some scrambled egg in there, or some ground turkey, or some chopped pinky, just for some variety for them. And I'm like, if you want to know for sure if it's eating, put a little dish of food next to the basking spot somewhere, so that when it comes out to bask, it can see the food, and it will eventually navigate over to that food dish, grab some of it and eat it, and you'll know that it's eaten it. If you don't see it happen, but you'll know that it's eaten it, because it'll be gone, right?
Yeah.
So that will put you at ease. But, you know, depending on the monitor you receive, they might eat right in front of you, no problem. Other ones might grab a cricket behind the cork and eat it in there, because, or I see it all the time too, even with Odatria, they'll grab bugs and then they'll run into the rock nooks and bang it around in there. Like, you can't really see it, right? So it's individualistic, but I think like patience obviously is the key there, right? So
Oh, for sure.
be patient with them. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will. I don't have one adult tree monitor really that hasn't come around, and all of my adults, with the exception of a few, are original imported animals. So that reminds me, we got to talk about the breeding age of monitors later, because I was doing
Okay.
some intel into my own collection, and I was like, I had certain things picked up on. Anyways, but that's what I would say with the babies. But yeah, like if you wanted to socialize your tree monitor and handle it, no problem. Go ahead and do it. It's your lizard, and remember, like your captive bred baby, it doesn't know the wilds of Indonesia. You're what it knows, and its surrounding is what it knows. So it can feel comfortable and live that life. If you wanted it to run out on you every day and run up on your shoulder, sure, that's enrichment for the lizard. There's nothing wrong with that at all, right? So I would just say, don't force it, right? Like, take your time. Eventually it will happen, but stick your hand in there, coax it onto your hand with some food or whatever, and eventually it'll just be commonplace. That's what it expects. That's its routine. And then every time you open up the cage and stick your hand in, it's going to jump on you and then crawl up your arm. And if that's what you want to do with it, that's what will happen. It might just take longer for some than others, right? You just have to be patient with it. So I get a lot of people asking me, I want a tree monitor that is the smallest possible, so that I can socialize it, right? Which, fair enough, I can understand. You want it from the youngest age possible, although we can't, you shouldn't really sell
I would
them.
wait a couple months. I would wait.
Yeah. That is the problem, right? They have to be
Yeah.
with you for a couple months likely before they're you'd feel safe shipping them. And then once they're past that, like, month and a half to 2 month window, and they have lots of meals in them, and they put a little bit of size on, then when they get to the new person, even if they are shy and they don't feed right away, they won't lose huge amounts of body weight, and they'll still be good for a long time while you sort some stuff out. If you're sending a hatchling tree monitor to somebody, I mean, if it's not happy off the get-go, you might only have a few days before it becomes dehydrated,
Yeah.
listless because it hasn't eaten and all that, and so it's not very forgiving. So you have to kind of work within those constraints, but generally you're like 2 months or 2 months or so. But even the ones that I have some that I've been I do a lot of international shipping, so I have to wait for CITES permits and all that stuff. So sometimes I'm sitting on tree monitors for 5, 6, 8 months even, right? And I really don't do anything with those things. And they're, just by virtue of seeing me every day and opening up enclosures. And I have an employee that, sometimes she's a little more hands-on with them too, but they're pretty good. They come around, but yeah. So even as long as they're like CB and their interactions with humans are usually positive, they're going to come around at some point, I find.
Yeah.
Right?
I think tree monitors in general are pretty friendly, like, and easy to work with compared to like some other species, like the Niles and ornate Niles, they're a little bit trickier.
I can't take those ones myself because I don't have like Niles, but
those are a little bit different, their personalities are a little bit different, so they're not as like happy-go-lucky as like the tree monitors are. Well, at least not at first. And then so what I do with acclimating the CB monitors or baby monitors is like, well, first off, if you're a new keeper, my suggestion is to do tons of research, like get everything ready before, you bring this animal home, make sure everything, is all set up, make sure, like correct husbandry and all of that. So that if you do have issues, you already know it's not the husbandry, right? Because you already did all your research and everything. So after you bring your monitor home, I would say, just let it chill out for a little bit. You're getting it out of the box, offer it some water right away because it's probably really thirsty, because they do get a little bit stressed during shipping. So offer it water right away. For me, I will just use the hand sprayer and I'll just spray their face if they're, thirsty. They usually drink right away. And then I also have some food in there. If it's like a baby tree monitor or something, or maybe a baby monitor that's small and eats insects, then I'll have some insects in there. I'll, throw them in there, dusted and everything. That way, like, they can eat whenever they're hungry or they're ready. And I feel like with CB, most of the time they acclimate very quickly, because they're used to being in captivity. I find with mine, they'll be eating, drinking, basking, acting pretty normal within maybe even a couple of hours. Like sometimes it's very quick, and then other times it could be, maybe a few days. If they're like really freaked out, if their personality is more anxious, timid, it might take them like a week until you start seeing some, normal behaviors or whatever. And with mine, because I want mine to be social and friendly, I will adopt a schedule, because I find like the monitors, they really like to be on a schedule. So like, first thing in the morning, lights are on, they're getting watered, whatever, they're going to bask. And then I will try to offer them food. If they want to take it from tongs, awesome. If they don't, like I'll put it in the little bowl for them. And at this time, I'm not really concerned about handling them. I mean, if they jump out on me, that's great. I'll let them do it. And I won't do anything that freaks them out, because I'm a new person. They don't know who I am, all that kind of stuff. So like if they jump on me, I'm going to be very still. I'm not really going to talk loud, do anything that could possibly spook them. I'm just going to let them crawl on me and explore and do whatever. But I'm also going to be prepared if they do get spooked and they jump off. I got to like have my hands, ready. So that's what I do about like the feeding and the watering. And then at a different time, I will start working on the social interaction, because I don't want the monitor lizard to associate contact with me as food. Because otherwise what's going to end up happening is they're going to like, oh, okay, yeah, the human is coming. Since they always have the food in their hands, I'm going to run up and bite their hands thinking, oh, she's coming to feed me. So that's why I have separate times for feeding, watering, whatever. And then other times when I'm not feeding them and it's just the social interaction. So they know that, when I come around, it's not just about the food, So when I do the social interaction, again, like I'll just like stick my hand in there, stay close to the ground, if they are a little like, weird about me or whatever. And then I'll just wait until they come over and investigate. The cool thing about monitor lizards is they're very intelligent. They're very curious, especially if they are CB. They have less fear of people. They're used to people. So they're like, hey, let me check out this person and, see what they're about and, whatever. And I'll just, take it very slow with them. And I'll do interactions like maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time where they're like outside of the cage. If they do come out on me, if they don't, I'll just stay there with my hand in there and just wait. And again, 10, 15 minutes. And then I'm closing the door again, letting them bask, get warmed up or whatever, because, like our houses are not this hot, humid environment that they need. So it's good to let them like warm up again. And then if you see them, they want to come out, like if they're begging at the glass, they're like, hey, let me out. Yeah. And then like I'll wait a little bit, and then maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes or so until I know they've warmed up, and I'll open the door again and I'll let them come out again. And I know that probably sounds like kind of crazy to keep, going back and forth like that. But for me, like, I don't want them to get sick. So,
I don't. I think if you even had them out for an hour, that wouldn't lead to like a respiratory infection.
Yeah. But I mean, a baby.
That's enough stress. Well, I think most of those things are stress related with like, for like cool temperatures and stuff. But
because
you're small and like
so I do like very short interactions and put them back. And And like, I will do it. I'll try to do it every single day for the first year of their lives, because that's good. That makes all the difference in the world. If you do it every single day for the first year while they are with you in your care as a baby to, however old. And then after that, the progress that you've made, you don't have to do it every day, and they're still going to be just as friendly and trusting of you. One really important thing is to don't ever grab them, because if you grab them, they're going to be really scared of you. That's like what a predator does. So you don't want to grab them. You don't want to be loud. You don't want to force them to do anything. You don't want to interact with them like when they're trying to sleep in their cork tube or something like that. Wait until they're like active and moving around, and then try to interact with them.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you do that every day for the first year of life, you're going to have a really friendly monitor lizard. And like when I have mine outside of their cages, like I do stuff that they enjoy. So like I'll let them crawl on the furniture. I let them crawl up the curtains. I'll take them outside. I'll let them walk in the grass and, maybe dig in the dirt or do whatever. So yeah, they enjoy it.
Grab it.
Huh?
Wait for that hawk to come down and grab it.
No, well, not just the little ones, even the big ones, like Skittles. Dude,
Yeah.
I take Skittles. Okay, Skittles is my ornate Nile. So I take Skittles outside, and I have chipmunks in the yard, in the garden, and she goes crazy trying to like dig them up out of the holes. And I'm like, I mean, she loves it, but I'm like, no, you're not eating any chipmunks.
Oh.
So I always have to like get her away from there, but she loves it.
I used, when I had fewer animals way back in the day, I had frilled lizards. I love frilled dragons, right? And I had a breeding group of frilled lizards, and I had this really big male frilled dragon, and I would take them outside too, right? It'd be at the cottage or at the house, and I'd put them in the backyard, and they were like shell shocked being outside, but they would take them a few minutes to kind of get used to it, and then they'd start roaming around and wandering. Well, I had this big male frilled dragon, and it was like dead in the grass. Like it was scared, and it wouldn't move. So I was like, oh man, I maybe I should put it on like a higher pedestal so it can see up a bit higher. So I start to walk back up to it. The thing takes off, does the whole two-legged Jesus run to the house, screws up the side of the house, up the roof.
Oh my
right?
God.
I had to get a ladder to get my male frilled lizard off the bricks of the house.
Oh my God.
So fast on the two-legged peel. It was awesome. But yeah.
Yeah, that is too funny. That's too funny.
Yeah.
So what I will say about I'll save that for the wild caught. I'll save that because wild caught babies are different than CB babies too. But anyway, CB babies are very easy to acclimate as long as you're not doing anything to scare them. As long as all your husbandry is correct, they're gonna, get used to the environment. The other thing I do when I want monitors to be used to people, when I want them to be social, is when they first come here to my house, I will set them up in my living room, because my living room is the busiest room in the house. My kids come through here, I'm in here, excuse me. And that way, like, it helps them to get used to people. Back in the day when I was doing reptile rescue, I would have like a bunch of people coming over and like playing with all my tree monitors and stuff. And my tree monitors got super friendly towards everyone, because the whole thing about monitor lizards, they're really smart. So like they're going to know the difference between, me and somebody else. And just because they're really tame with me, that doesn't mean they're going to be tame with someone that they don't know. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing too to keep in mind. So let's say like you buy a baby or you buy a CB animal that's an adult or something like that, and the person who has it's like, oh, it's super tame, it's puppy dog tame, and it gets to you and it's like freaking out, doing the whole throat thing and tail whipping and whatever. Well, yeah, it might do that because it's afraid, like you haven't earned its trust yet. So don't think that like the other person lied to you about it being tame or anything. It's just, it doesn't have that relationship with you. It doesn't trust you yet. It's afraid. It just went through shipping or, whatever, give it some time. And, like I said, you want it to be social, put it on a schedule, put it in your living room where it can see people, interact with it every day. Don't force it to do anything. Don't grab it, stuff like that. But
Yeah,
anyway.
I always, like when it comes to that too, right? If like people are having trouble with their, with their CB babies that they acquire from you or wherever, right? I often get questions from people that bought lizards from somebody else. And, and one of the first, I get this a lot. It's like everything in the enclosure is spot on, like everything's perfect. So I know it's not the enclosure. And I'm like, how do you know? Right? Like that one assumption that people have is like very detrimental because it really narrows the scope of vision, like to it's not my problem. Like it's not something that I'm doing. It's the lizard, right? Where it's like, no, you might think that you have met all the parameters, but something could not be right. You're missing it. Something that lizard doesn't like. You actually have to like look at the behavior of that lizard. When's it coming out to bask? Where is it hiding in the enclosure? Is it basking all the time? Is it not basking ever? Like those are all indicators of temperature and things like that. One of the things that like you said that when you get a monitor in your a new monitor in your care, or you put it in the family room, right? So it has a lot of traffic, right? So, that has positive effects sometimes, but sometimes depending on the situation and where the enclosure is situated in the room, right? It's like that might be very catastrophic, right? There's like two trains of thought on that. Like all of my monitor enclosures, they can't see other reptiles. I have them all facing the same way in the shop. I know other breeders are different. They have it, but like there are like real subtle social cues that most people don't pick up on with them. I've learned some of these things over many, many years, and and a lot of it has to do with what they can visualize outside of the enclosure, right? And I'll talk about that. We'll talk about acclimating wild caught ones, but like even CB babies. I mean, if you have a CB baby in a reptile room or even in your living room, and if that thing's basking and you have a cat that is playing on the other side of the room, well, instinctually it's going to think, well, that thing's bigger than me. I'm a menu item. I should probably hide, a lot of the time. So that can be one of the reasons it doesn't eat well, or you don't see it, or if you have a dog that runs by all of the time, right? Or if it's near a window and there's a bird feeder there and there's birds constantly flying, like there's all sorts of things that people really overlook when they say, oh, everything is spot on with the enclosure. I'm like, okay, but it's not behaving the way it typically should. So there could be some other issues. Like I'll give you a story about like Pilbarensis. I had Odatria, obviously not a tree monitor, but like Pilbarensis, I had a group, like I had when I first built my new shop and I put everything in the shop, I was like, what is going on with these Pilbara rock monitors, right? And I was like, they're not breeding like they normally do. Everything's spot on for them. Temperatures are like, it's a, really professionally built shop, all climate controlled, everything. I'm like, they're just not doing anything. So I just sat there and watched them for like a while. And I started to look and I was like, man, these things are chronically looking through the vent holes through the back of their enclosure at the tree monitors behind them, right? So the monitor enclosures behind them. So they're just constantly focused on these bigger lizards through the vent holes, right? Because I have those sliding floor vents that I use. So they're decent sized holes, so they're like looking through at these tree monitors. And I was like, huh. So I put curtains on the back side of them so they can like away from the enclosure so that airflow can still get through, but they can't see the enclosures in the next aisle. And within, a few weeks of doing that, things were all back to normal. But it was like they were freaked out by the bigger lizards in the enclosures behind them. So, I mean, I don't know.
Mine don't like snakes. None of my monitors like snakes. Not even the smell of snakes. They will freak out.
That's inherent.
But they do get used to dogs and cats. Like mine.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Mine have gotten used to dogs and cats, although like when they're in their cages, they're okay. When I take them out, some of them like they don't run, but they'll watch.
Yeah.
Some of them will watch. It depends on their personality.
Yeah.
And then other monitors will walk right up to dogs and cats and be right in their face.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
You know, like they don't care.
Definitely snakes are a deal because like I learned that with frilled lizards years ago because I used to have like black-headed pythons and stuff, and you know, the frilled lizards that I got, they were like captive bred babies. They'd never seen a snake in their life, but there's an innate fear of snakes, right? In these things, and like the frilled lizards would freak out. They see a snake, oh my god, they'd run, they'd frill up. Like if y'all wanted to get a good picture, all I had to do was show the frilled lizards a black-headed python, and they it was awesome. But yeah, they definitely, and it's, you know what? It's funny because people are no different, right?
Yeah.
People,
it's like, true.
Yeah, you know, people that you know, let's say if we're talking about immigrant populations, people that have immigrated from Africa and parts of Asia and stuff, you know, if they see a snake, their automatic assumption is, man, get that thing away from me. It's venom, you know, because every snake, they have an innate fear of it. Every snake has the potential to kill you in some of these regions, right? Whereas like me being the white guy from Canada, like my ancestors were European, there's no deadly snakes there. What the heck, right? It doesn't matter. You know, but there is like there is an innate fear that they have. They definitely have, you know, a genetic recognition of certain things.
For sure.
So yeah, birds typically, yes, and snakes for sure, right? Because they're probably the two most common predators in the wild for these things. So it's in their, you know, it's in their best self-preservation mechanism to have a fear of these things, right? So but yeah, that's you know, that's, you know, the fundamentals of acclimating captive bred or acclimatizing captive bred babies to a new environment, right? Those are some things to watch for. Right? So, but if we talk about, you know, if we move to imports, that's like a whole new ball game, right? With imports.
we can switch to that because I don't have any other comments about
CBB. I think CBB is pretty basic, and like I said, any, you know, like any breeder worth their salt, I mean, if they sell you an animal, they obviously want it to do best it possibly can. So if you have questions or you think you're missing something or whatever, by all means, you know, shoot them a message. Like I'll answer questions even if you didn't buy from me typically, right? You know, I'll try and help you out. I get that all the time. So, and usually we can kind of piece together where, you know, maybe their enclosure's lacking or what's going on for them. But most of the time, I would say 95% of the time that I get these like inquiries about my baby's not eating, it's not doing this, it's just like a patience thing. It's just like they're just not seeing. They just, you know, maybe it's the first tree monitor. They don't know how they behave. They have this expectation that this thing is gonna, like, you open the sliding glass and it's gonna eat from the palm of your hand right away, and it's like, and it doesn't happen, and they're like, what's going on? I'm like, don't worry, it will happen. Just give it some time. Be patient, right? So that's the key. Like people that are successful with Reptile, I heard this somewhere else too. The people that are successful with reptiles are the ones that just put in the time. They get a project and they put in the time and they learn it. They don't get frustrated with it. You know, whether that means the babies aren't selling right away or whether it's like, oh, this thing's scared all the time, you know, and they sell it after a month of having it. You see that all the time. Well, they do that with everything and they don't have any success. But if you want success with these things, right, if it's something that you know, you're initially in love with, give it some time, right? And by time, I'm talking like a couple years.
Years for sure. For sure.
So, I mean, don't just write it off because it doesn't behave the way you want it to right away, right? Yeah. Like you said, they're super smart, like tree monitor, Indonesian monitors, but tree monitors and crocodile monitors are the smartest monitor lizards I've worked with, and they definitely recognize people. They definitely remember traumatic situations, right? And regardless of the lizard, they're all going to have some mild trauma or major trauma, depending on how they acquired it. Even the shipping process is like, what the hell's going on for this thing, right? So the best we can do is minimize that. But yeah, But like an import, like we're going to talk about, it's like it's a whole new ball game.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And like, I just want to say with the wild caught imports, for me, I have a quarantine period. And during the first part of it, like, remember I was saying, oh, if I want it to be social, I'm going to put it in my living room. So it's different when you have the wild caught because they're going to be freaked the fuck out. Like, they're going to be scared and they might not eat.
Right?
Yeah, they might not eat. They might not whatever. So you don't want to do that when you first get them until you know that they are healthy. And then once they are healthy, then, and you want to work on socialization, then you can move to that. Like, that's what I do. I make sure these wild caught imports are healthy first before I try to start any of that socialization and whatever, because they really don't need the extra stress when they're trying to, one, they're trying to acclimate, two, they might be sickly, all that stuff. So like, for me, like, I just try to make sure, like, okay, sometimes I even have to cover the front glass of the enclosure. Like I've had some wild caught monitors, like, so this Dumerals monitor that I took in, that was, its mouth was like all bashed up. She had like mouth rot. She had a respiratory infection. She had like missing teeth. The reason why she had that in the first place is because she could see through wherever she was being kept, she could see it. And she was bashing her face, trying to get out. So you really do have to pay attention to your monitors, because if you get one and you see one of these wild caught ones doing that, you're going to have to cover the glass. You're going to have to cover it completely. Otherwise, they're going to bash their face up, and then they're going to get, all these like wounds, and it could get infected, and then you could have to go to the vet. Like how I did with mine, that I took in. I had to take her to the vet. They had to give me antibiotics to give her. I had to like clean her mouth every day. I had to put like these other like liquid antibiotics all over her mouth. And it took a while. It took a while for her to heal up and, become normal again. But like with her, I had to cover the front glass. And then after she was all healed up, then I started like, moving the barrier away from the glass, little by little, because I didn't want her to like bash and like try to mess up her face all over again, because it was just healed up. And then eventually she started getting used to that, started getting used to like, my house and all the activity out of there. And then I would move to, okay, let's try to venture out the living room, more people, more socialization. So yeah, you're going to have some like that. You're also going to have some that are, like the Niles. So like I've had Niles, and all the Niles I've had were wild caught. Some of them were really messed up, and some of them, were not too bad. They're just maybe like a little dehydrated, emaciated. But the Niles are different. They're not like a tree monitor. And with those, they're very, very smart, and they're very like, I don't know. It's like they watch everything. They're constantly like on alert, watching everything, listening to everything, smelling everything. So in the beginning, you like really have to be very slow, quiet, gentle, non-threatening. And I know with mine, with Skittles, she came around pretty quickly, but that's because of what I do. And some people are going to tell you, don't do this. What I do, I really say this up to the person. So after she was like, okay, again, make sure they're healthy and everything. I would just take her out. And of course she was afraid of me, but I would wait until she was active. And then once I saw her active, like I would try to put my hand in there and see if she would come. But of course she was scared to death, so she wouldn't come. And I would take her out. I would take her out and I would hold her in my hands, for like a minute. And then she would just calm down. And when I mean hold in my hands, I don't mean constricting, because constricting is really bad. Like, you don't want to grab or constrict. I would just let her walk through my hands until she calmed down and was like, oh, okay, This human isn't trying to eat me or hurt me. And then she would just chill out and she would be okay. And then I would just do that every single day. And about after a week, she was coming to me by herself.
Mhm.
She learned like, oh, you're okay. And then I just, I worked with her every single day on the schedule, made sure to have separate interaction time and separate, feeding time, because Niles are one of those species, and so are Savannah monitors, that if you don't have separate time, if you don't work with them in addition to just feeding them, they're going to assume every single time you come to the glass, food time. you know
Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the import, like, species of monitors that I've imported that I've had to acclimate. And, most like tree monitors, all of them, because, when you started with your green trees and when I started breeding mine, actually, in some serious numbers, there was no such thing as a captive bred tree monitor, right? So
Yeah.
every single adult that I started working with was an import. Um, and, part of that, this will lead into some of the questions, but it was like, for years, I just did Odatria. I did every species of Odatria I could, right? And then it was like, I didn't want to do the tree monitors because at least with the Odatria, you didn't have to, when it came to selling them, you didn't have to compete with, imported animals from Australia, right? Because obviously that's not allowed, right? So it's just like whoever was producing them, that's who you could buy babies from, and then you didn't have that sort of import price tag to kind of compete with. Because back in the day, if you're housing and feeding a tree monitor and you had to sell a baby tree monitor for the price that imports were coming in, like, and I mean, it's one thing to do it for the love, but if you had a group of them, like I was breeding them sort of on a commercial, like not the tree monitors at that point, but the Odatria on a business or commercial level, it's like, if the numbers didn't work so that you could sell babies for a reasonable price, then it just wasn't worth breeding them. That's why I didn't try and work with tree monitors for the longest time, was because you could get an import whatever for $400 or $500, and by the time I got my a pair of green trees and then put them in the elaborate enclosure and then fed them what they needed to eat, it's like it didn't make economical sense to really do it. And I was enthralled in the Odatria as well. And then, over time, these things, they started coming, less and less frequently and stuff. And the only reason I started getting into tree monitors was basically like it was kind of like a moment where some people back in like the early 2000s or whatever were like, anybody can breed Odatria, but nobody can breed tree monitors, blah, blah, blah. But there was, listen to the people that would say this, and somebody made like a personal comment to me about it, and on a forum back in the day, and it's the same people that, they had a pair of blues and they couldn't breed the blues. They couldn't breed the Kimberleys they had either. So I was like, man, I really want to try this just so I can kind of say, like, put it in your, like, kind of like all monitors are roughly the same, really, right? There's a slightly different parameters, but behavior and stuff, monitors. So I ended up getting a pair of blue trees on breeding loan, and so they didn't cost me anything. So I was like, you know what, I'll house these things. The guy that had them couldn't breed them. And then the female was a dud. I ended up picking up another female from a pet store. I think I've said this story on podcast before. But then it was like, I basically just did what I would do for a Kimberly Rock monitor in a bigger enclosure, right? Give them some options, give them whatever they needed, and they just bred, and they were no different. But like when I started, so once I bred the blues, it was like they weren't coming in at all in Canada, especially anymore, right? Like nobody had seen wild caught ones, and it's only gotten, more and more strict to get imported stuff since then. So it's been a very good time to breed tree monitors for people that were into breeding monitors, because now even if you do see an import come in, the price of those imports is so high that it's almost comparable to your CB babies, right? So
Yeah.
it's been a worthwhile endeavor. I mean, I've always loved them, right? And it's just like I only have so much space, so if I'm going to dedicate space to stuff, but now that they are, you know, and the awareness of them has become so great as well, right? There's a lot more interest in them, so your client base has become, you know, has gone through the roof. So now it's really worth putting the time in to really figure these things out over the last 10, 15 years. But yeah, like, but getting some of those back to like the import thing, you know, if I were to lay out what I do for an imported monitor, like I'll just tell you straight up what I do for an import, right? And there's a spectrum of imports. Some of them you get and it's like, you know, they're like a bag of bones and
Yeah.
hydrated, and you're just like, oh my God, because you don't know, like you have, if they come from Indonesia, they have collectors and villages and stuff or whatever, you know, they bag them up, they catch them, they bag them up. They could sit in that bag for a week, 2 weeks. They make their way to a farm or an exporter. They could be sitting at that exporter's place forever. And, you know, like the reality is, I mean, the farms, a few of the farms have changed. I'm not knocking all the farms, but a lot of them, especially back in the day, it was like, you know what, if the thing dies in an enclosure or it dies in a bag, then I'll just get a new one. Right. And I'll just get a new one for this shipment. Right. So a lot of times you're getting like some really, really rough looking animals. So by the time they got to you, I mean, they'd been through the ringer, and you could tell by looking at them. Right. Like, you know, I've received animals in the past that, you know, they were so frail that they couldn't even panic to get away from you. They was like, you know, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like my first Bomei were like that. And
So what did you do? What did
so
you do?
yeah, so what I do, depending on the condition of the animal, right? It's the protocol is roughly the same, but you gotta kind of have to watch. Like when I first get them in, one of the things that I do is I will always treat them for ectoparasites, so mites and ticks. So to my knowledge, when they're in Indonesia on these
We lost Brandon. Let me text him. Hold on. Maybe his camera went out. Anyway, I agree with Brandon about treating for parasites. I treat everything for parasites, even if the fecal comes back negative, because sometimes there's false negatives with the fecal exams. For me, I use Panicure for worms, and if they also have like a protozoa or maybe flagellate infection, which you will know if something has that because they will, their poop is like runny. It can also be a little discolored, like a lighter color. The animal, they might have like a decreased appetite or something like that. Okay, so Brandon says he's gonna be right back. We'll just wait for him. But yeah, so like if they have like a decreased appetite, they're super thirsty, their poop is really runny, really smelly, that usually means that they have like protozoa, which you need to treat with Flagyl instead of Panicure. Panicure won't work for that. Oh, here comes Brandon. Here, let me try to get him back on here.
Sorry, that was my
lost you. It's okay. I was talking
all this monitor talk that my computer I was out on the deck at the cottage and I didn't have the computer plugged. And I was like, oh, damn. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about, while you were gone, I was talking about what I do to treat the different types of parasites. I only talked about using Panicure for worms and Flagyl with the protists and flagellates. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was on the, you know, when they're in these farms in Indo or they get ticks on them, right? They get mites on them, just like the snakes do. And a lot of people are unaware that like snake mites can affect tree monitors too. A lot of them come in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So but people assume that they don't. But they pull the ticks off them in Indonesia. before they ship them. They have to, or else they're shipping like a visible secondary species, and they're not allowed to do that. So to my knowledge, they have to pull the ticks off them, which is fine,
Yeah.
right? So when I first get them in, if it's an imported animal, and I've done this numerous times because that's pretty much my adult breeding groups or imports, with the exception of a few of the holdback animals that I've brought into those. But when I first get them, I'll unbag them, and then I will give them just a soak in some water first, right? So I'll just put them in a little tote with some water because they're going to be dehydrated. Like when I ship a captive bred baby, when it arrives to you, it might be thirsty because it hasn't drank for 24 hours. Before I ship, I always go through and spray everybody so they can get a good drink before I put them in their bags or the deli cups, right? And then they ship to you and that's it. But like some of those, but that's not a dehydrated lizard. That might just be a thirsty lizard.
Yeah.
Drink, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I get an import one from a farm, now you're talking about real dehydration. So,
Yeah.
and this is where the problem comes in with medicating, which I'll talk about. But so when I get them, depending on, all of them, I'll put them in a bin of water. One of the reasons I put them in a little bin of water so they can get a soak, they can drink as much as they want to drink. You can make it like an electrolyte solution, right? With some Pedialyte or something if you really want to. But one of the reasons I give them a drink off the hop is because the next thing I do, once I give them a soak in just pure water so they can fill up, get quenched, then what I do is I'll put them in a secondary tote and I will treat them for mites right away. But I don't treat them with like Prevenamite or anything. What I do is I get you can go to your drugstore and they have a kids head lice shampoo. In Canada, it's called Nix. I think you have the same stuff.
Oh yeah, we have the same stuff here.
Yeah. So, and it's very gentle, right? It kills lice, but it's not super toxic because it's for kids. So I'll put them in a little tote. I'll mix a bottle of shampoo in a spray bottle with water, and then I'll spritz it on them and I'll let them sit in there for 30 minutes. And that kills all of any mites or bugs and stuff that might be on them, right? And the reason I put them in the water first is so that they can drink as much as they possibly can and get quenched. Because if you don't do that and you just try and spray them with the Nix, then they'll drink that, right? So I do that. I let them sit for 30 minutes in the Nix, and then I rinse them off. And this is all being done in a quarantine room. So my quarantine room is separate from my established breeding facility. It's actually a room in the basement of my house that if I get a new import, I put them in there. And though the enclosures that I put them in there, they can be, depending on how big the import is, they can be either a 4x2x2, which is a short one, or a 4x2x4, which is slightly taller. And I put them in there. I always put them solo. They're never with another animal in that enclosure. They're always 100% on their own. I always put a curtain in front of them so that they feel secure and enclosed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I leave them the hell alone.
Yeah.
Leave them the hell alone. At that point, I find whatever's going to happen to them is going to happen. I do not medicate right away. One of the reasons I don't medicate right away is because the buildup of parasites and things that they have now that is affecting them negatively, it's only built up in their system because they're stressed. They've been stressed for potentially 2, 3, 4 months, however long they've been there, right? So my main focus is eliminating stress. One of the stress elimination techniques is to just have them alone, so they can't see anything else, so that they feel secure in a smaller enclosure than what you'd typically put them in, right? And just leave them be. The next thing you have to do is kind of figure out what that monitor lizard wants to eat, right? So, and they can be totally varied.
They can be picky too.
Right. So, acclimating Bomei for me was one of the interesting ones because I had some females wouldn't touch pinky mice, wouldn't touch scrambled eggs, wouldn't touch ground turkey. They don't eat crickets. Okay. If you only eat crickets, that's what the hell I'm going to feed you. They don't have a ravenous appetite when they get off the boat either, right? Like a lot of times they're just like, you know, crazy. I had a male and female Bomei that I got in that were on, they were really probably the worst looking tree monitors I've ever got in, to the point where I was actually worried that I might not be able to turn them around. Did that initial protocol with them, put them in enclosures, curtains over the enclosure, and they wouldn't eat anything. They wouldn't eat anything. And I was like, this is not good, right? So what I found that they wanted were hornworms, a big green caterpillar. That's what they wanted. But they would eat one at a time. They'd eat one, and then that would be it. So it was literally a month and a half long period of time where I'd feed them one hornworm every day or every second day to kind of help rehydrate and put some mass on them. And then once they got over that kind of initial stress and starvation period that they had at the export, then they started to pick at other things, right? I definitely wasn't force feeding them. Force feeding them is a death sentence. And like,
we'll go back to that.
Yeah, trust.
We'll go back to that. We'll go back to that.
Yeah, force feeding is a death sentence. I definitely wasn't pumping them filled with, full of antibiotics and Flagyl and Panacur and everything like that, right? Because my trainer,
you're very different than me, but we'll go back to that.
One of the reasons you don't do that is because all these medications are either processed by the liver and the kidneys, right? And if you have a highly dehydrated monitor, its kidneys are compromised already. The last thing you want to do is force the kidneys to work harder than they have to process the medication. And a lot of times they just can't. They die from it, right? Especially if you do it like right out of the bag, pump it with Panacur and Flagyl. Don't.
Not ASAP. Let me tell you.
Just wait, right?
Okay, so go ahead.
There's a time. there is a time, right? So
yeah,
I don't do that right away. I just let them be, and for me, eliminating the stress is the biggest thing. Once they feel secure, once their immune response picks back up, they tend to deal with a lot of that crap on their own, right? I mean, I have many breeders now that I have never put a drop of medication in, and they're fat and healthy and pumping out babies, right? So if you have, I'll go back, if you have one, and there are situations where you have one for a long time, it's like, man, this thing's not picking up weight. It's not, it's not doing what it should be doing at this stage in the game. Then, then I would be like, okay, yeah, I'll see what it's got, right? I'll take a stool sample in. I'll see if there's something. And then, okay, yeah, Flagyl, Panacur. And then at that point, yeah, you get rid of those internal parasites that have built up and it hasn't been able to manage itself. And then it's off to the races. Then once you do that, it picks up weight and it's good to go, right? But I would never, my personal opinion is I would never throw medication in an imported animal right away. It's like, for me, I've seen it done. I would never force feed an imported animal right away. I mean, I've done it and it's never worked out well. And I know people that do it, it never works out well. So those are some things. And then my quarantine period is like minimum 6 months, right? So separate from the rest of the animals, usually in that time, by the time the 6 months is over, they look like a captive bred animal, right? And I'm confident, okay, I can put you guys into the breeding program in the main facility and go from there. But that's what I do. So, one of the things that I find imported animals really do like to eat a lot of readily is ground turkey. It's like almost every single imported animal will eat ground turkey. So if you have something that just refuses everything, I mean, ground turkey is not ideal, but it's good to get it over a hump, let's say, right? If it's not eating anything and you want to get something in it. And the other thing is, don't try and jam it with food. If you try and if you let them gorge themselves and they're sick, they're just going to barf it up, and that's not good either, right? Small amounts of food. You got to remember, the reptiles, their metabolism's relatively slow, right? So they can do well on very little food for a long period of time, right? Like those Bomei, they were eating one hornworm every second day, let's say, and they were still able to hydrate and put on a bit of weight just doing that until they were comfortable enough to start exploring and picking up new food items, right? So, you know, if you're like, if you're somebody who has force fed in the past, and you're like, I don't even know how much food to give this thing, right? It's like, that could be the problem. You pump them with so much food, they just barf it up and regurgitate because they're sick already. There's all sorts of things like that. So I kind of just literally let them do the talking in a way. I let them tell me what they need, right? And I try and be as hands off with those animals as possible. I know it's really, really hard for people because you want to jump into the rescue, right? But a lot of this stuff is really slow progressing, incremental benefits over a long period of time. And it's very hard to wrap your head around, like, oh man, it hasn't gained any weight in a week. It's like, yeah, it might take 2 months, right? You just want to
gaining weight takes a long time. Yeah.
So that is one of the things. So yeah, like that's kind of what I do off the hop if I get an imported animal. And like I said, if it's been a long time and it's like, yeah, this is not following the typical weight gain protocol and it's still skinny and, it could eat and it's eating well and it's still skinny, then you probably got some sort of worm or internal parasite that then I would say, okay, panicure, flagell, get that out of there. But you're talking like 3 or 4 months after I've got it at that point. Right. So, never right away.
Okay. Now you want to hear my side because mine is the exact opposite of you pretty much. Okay. And I'm telling you what, I've never had any of them die. So, and it's probably because I used to work for Reptile Rescue and I used to work really close with a veterinarian. So, and this is the way that you can do it differently. So if I get in an import and it's like on death's door, it looks like a skeleton. Mm-hmm. I will make an appointment with my veterinarian right away, SAAP, as soon as I can get in. And usually she can't see me the same day. Usually it's like, a few days or like a week later or whatever. During that time, I will try to do my best to get that monitor to eat and drink and everything to the best, that it can do. And sometimes the monitors are so messed up that they can't even climb. So I will have to put them in like a smaller enclosure. Like sometimes like with the tree monitors, I've gotten some in that could barely even walk. They were like comatose. And so like for those, I mean, since they couldn't climb or walk, I'd have to put them in like a 20-gallon tank. And you don't ever want to do that with a healthy adult. But I did do it with like the really sick ones that can't even walk or move around or eat on their own or anything. Just so that like it didn't have to climb up anything to get to like under the basking area. And then it could just, move over. Sometimes I would even have to move it over because I just couldn't even move. But anyway, so like I'll take them to the vet. And of course, since they're so dehydrated, the vet will give them sub-Q fluids, right? Mm-hmm. So you're already getting it hydrated. Mm-hmm. Then I will get prescribed the panicure, flagell, and most of the time they're sick and they need antibiotics too for a respiratory infection. Sometimes I've even had them be infected with fungus. So there are 4 different things going on, right? You have an animal.
You get your tree monitors from. Holy.
They look like a skeleton. Some of them will try to eat on their own, but sometimes they can't. So like, this is how sick they are. So like, I'll have to try to hold the food up to them and just wait for them to like take it and try to swallow it and eat. And occasionally I will have one that just has like no will to live. And I mean, no will to live. It's like already done. It's like, whatever, just let me die. I don't want to eat. And those ones I will force feed. I've only had to do it a couple of times over the past 20 years, but I've had to do it because, I'm giving them this medication. They have to have food in their bellies, they have to have all of that. So I would just do like every day, like at the time that I'm giving the medicine, I would give like maybe a small mouthful And as I'm getting their mouth open, like with the syringe to give the medication, just put it in there and then just very gently try to push it down their throat until it goes all the way down to like right here. Because that otherwise, if you don't do that, it can just fling its head and the food will come right out.
Mm-hmm.
And that works. And like the last one that I had, Forrest, it was this beautiful, beautiful male green tree monitor. He was like that. He was like 98 grams or something as an adult. That is how thin he was. He's like over 300 grams right now.
Mm.
So he was so much of a skeleton, and he did not want to, he really didn't have the will to live. So like for the first month, I had to force feed him like that. He started gaining weight very slowly. As soon as like all the infections were done, and he had the fungus, he had internal parasites, he had the protozoa, and he had a respiratory infection. So he had 4. I treated him for all of that stuff.
Jeez.
And I had to force feed him. And guess what? After like a month, he was like, oh, I think I do want to be alive. And then he started eating on his own. And like, if you guys look on my Instagram or Facebook, he's so healthy. He's beautiful. Like you would have never known that he was like this half dead tree monitor. And he's not the only one. So like at the same time I got him, I also got 2 other tree monitors, both of them emaciated. The one female was probably even worse than him, was worse than Forrest, but she was different because she had the will to live. So she was trying to eat, as soon as I got her here to my house. And I mean, she did amazing turnaround, amazing recovery. But yeah, she ended up gaining the weight the fastest, more than the 2 males that I got at the same time that were also skeletons. Because she just had a very strong desire to live. And she also became super friendly very quickly. Again, this is her personality, and their personalities are different. Basil behind me was the other really skinny one. He also had the fungus in addition to the other 3 things.
What fungus did he have? Do you know?
I don't know, just like reptile fungus. It's not the kind that goes inside of you and develops like infection. You know what I'm talking about? It's just the kind on the outside that looks like where the skin looks gray and soft, and then it looks like a burn, but it's not a burn. And then if you don't treat it, it just keeps expanding. Like it'll heal up and then it will just keep expanding, and then you'll have like further breakouts. It's probably the most common reptile fungus that I see. And a lot of people will be like, oh, it just has a burn. It has a burn. They think it's a burn or like an injury, but it's not. It's actually fungus. And over time it'll spread and get bigger. And it's a fungus because it'll look different. Like it looks like a very soft, like the scales are not shiny. It's like very soft, dull looking.
Yeah. I was just curious because I had a case years ago where I used to have ornate uromastics, and they had like a fungal skin infection, but I don't know if it's native to where they were from. They dealt with it really well. They didn't show any, they were asymptomatic, but they must have carried it. Right. Anyways, needless to say, I sold those uromastics, but the enclosure that they were in, I put a pair of Pilbara rock monitors in there now. And keep in mind, like I bleached that enclosure. And at the time there was a veterinary grade, sterilizing agent too called Virkon that I used. So I bleached it, Virkoned it, put all new furnishings and everything in there, and there was still like fungal spores that hung around in that enclosure. Anyways, the Pilbarensis got that fungus, but it was because they had never, evolved with that type of fungus. It was very aggressive on them, to the point where it burned a hole in their back. Like it didn't burn a hole, but it ate a hole away in their scales on their back within a week. And I was like, holy geez. And I took it to a vet and did the whole 9 yards. And the vet actually told me it was bacterial. And I was like, that's not bacterial.
No, they can get infected with bacteria. The lesion.
The bacteria was a secondary infection. It wasn't what was caused, right? But anyways, needless to say, the way I treated the fungus with those guys was I took Canesten and Monistat. It's just a typical yeast infection cream from the drugstore. And I spread that on their back and that killed it, right? But that doesn't work on all fungus or all fungi.
No.
Some it will, some it won't, right? So some fungi are really really prevalent and invasive, and they just it's very hard to treat them, right?
I had a chameleon with 3 different types of fungus, because this is when I worked for the reptile rescue. So he was found out in the wilds of Colorado in a tree. This was a Austerlitz chameleon, by the way.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah, Austerlitz chameleon. So he had these like fungal lesions, but at the time I didn't know that it was fungus, because again, it looks like a burn. It looks like a wound, and it was infected. So take it to the vet, get antibiotics. We get the silver sulfate ointment, which is the best stuff to use on reptile skin for healing burns, everything else. So I'm treating him for that. He's also taking oral antibiotics, and it starts to heal up, but the lesion isn't going away, right? And then he starts to break out again with another area that looks dark. It looks dark and gray. And this was actually my first experience with fungus back in the day. Okay. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I take him back to the vet. I'm like, hey, can you culture this and see what is going on? Is this fungus? What type of fungus? What medication do we need to treat this? So she cultures it 3 different types of fungus. One was a reptile fungus. The other 2 were from birds, the wild birds, of course, because he was out in the wild and got exposed to all that. So she had to mix up this different type of medication, not the normal medication that you use for the topical standard reptile fungus, right? So this was something else, and he had to take it orally. And he had to put the topical stuff on the Conify lotion, but also he had to take oral antifungal medication, because that type of fungus ended up being inside of him as well, because there were 3 different types. So one of them was inside of him, in his body. And oh man, I felt so bad for that chameleon. He did great the first time I treated him. Everything was awesome. His skin healed up. And then, I don't know, it was months and months later, he had an episode again, and he started breaking out again, and he had to be treated again. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this time, he'll be completely fungus free, and maybe we knocked it out this second time, right? So no. So I moved then from Colorado to Pennsylvania, where I live now. And I think the stress of moving triggered another outbreak, and he broke out again. And then that third time, he didn't make it. He didn't make it the third time, because, the antifungal meds, they're really, really hard on the liver kidney.
Yeah, that's I see that a lot too, right? You were talking about, if they have a fungal lesion on their skin, a lot of times that'll heal up and it'll look like a burn, and people assume it's a burn. And because of my experience, I would always, in the groups and stuff back in the day, say, hey, something for you to consider is that it could be a fungus. Like the pilbarensis, when they got it, I treated it with Canesten, and luckily for me, it killed that fungi and it healed up, but it looked like a burn healing wound, right? The scales were all black there, and those animals never had a reoccurrence of an outbreak or anything. But the problem with fungal is that fungus spreads through spores, right? So a lot of them are environmental spores. So with those pilbaras, that whole enclosure that the Uromastyx used to be in, and then I put the pilbaras in there. Once I treated those pilbaras and their body was healed up and fungus free, I threw that enclosure in the garbage, because I had tried to sterilize the enclosure thoroughly. That was just part of my routine before I put something new in anything. I bleach it, Virkon it, do the whole 9 yards, and they still picked up spores from the enclosure. None of the furnishings were the same or anything. So in chameleon's case, if you just tried to treat the chameleon and you rid the chameleon of the fungus, but there were still spores in the environment and it was able to pick them up again, it will just get reinfected, right? So and like a Phydiomyces fungus is like a, you know, they attack like keratin-based scales, and like this is stuff you get on your toenails and shit, right? So, you know, that's really hard to get rid of. That's all environmental fungi. So you have to literally, like, if you're treating an animal for fungus, it's almost like you have to put them in a sterile box.
Oh yeah. Well,
then,
yeah.
You know,
That's another good point to bring up. So with me, what I started doing, like with this whole thing about, you know, keeping reptiles in tents, you know, which I don't think you can, you know, do that. But I will say, keeping a reptile very short term while you're quarantining in a tent is awesome, because when you're done, you can just throw it away and put them into, you know, a nice big, you know, pretty enclosure. Because like if you, let's say you get a wild caught import, right? And it turns out you're going to have to treat it for parasites or fungus or whatever. You put it in that nice, big, pretty cage. Oh my God, you're going to have to pull everything out, especially if it's like coccidia or something like that. Coccidia, oh my God, they'll reinfect themselves with that. That's a protist if you don't know. Those watching, I know Brandon knows what that is. But like, yeah, you got to like clean all this stuff, and that's such a pain in the ass. But I will say, like, man, when I started using these, the tents for quarantine and like treating them, I mean, that's just awesome, because the tents aren't very expensive. They keep all the humidity in, the heat in, whatever. And then when you're done, put it in the trash. Like, don't have to worry about it. I don't know. That was my tip for the day.
Yeah, no, like that's the problem with fungus is like, if you have a reptile that's infected with, you know, many types of fungi, the enclosure is as good as garbage.
Yeah.
Throw it out. Treat that animal in something that you don't mind throwing out, and before you ever put it in a new enclosure again that you want to keep long term, you got to make sure it's treated, because anything that thing has been in while it was infected with the fungus will have spores in it. And you see that, like, that's why that yellow fungus is so prevalent with bearded dragon people and other, you know, a few other agamid species, because it's like really hard to get rid of those spores. It's like, you just can't. You really can't. You can't sterilize enough. Like, you know, like I had a snake. I had a few snakes that were imported snakes, and they, you know, they came in with a fungus. I guess they came in with it, and it was like, all right, one of them passed away, and I knew it was a fungus. I just didn't know what kind it was. So I sent it through for pathology here to the university, and they came back and they said it was snake fungal disease. It's a Phydiomyces. It's an environmental fungus. It's like really hard to treat because it's an environmental one. Spores will be everywhere, right? But it only infects snakes, and, you know, and it was like, all right. Yeah, and then you have to isolate the correct medication, because a lot of antifungal, they all have different active ingredients, right? Like, you know, Canestin has like clomitrazole and stuff, and like Lamisil, the fungal cream, has like terbinafine, and they're all different antifungals for different strains of fungi. So you really have to isolate it, because like Canestin won't work on you know, on an Phydiomyces fungus. So once you dial it in, then it's treatable. But it's like any enclosure that those animals were in is garbage, literally, unless you want to get reinfected, like, you know, for the like it just is. And you know, from what I've seen with people in my own experience, it was like, I'm not risking it. It's like, that's what part of it's, that's the next reason for building my own enclosures. Like, you know,
that's why I think so many tree monitors have fungus, because, you know, the suppliers that get them in, they're not cleaning out their cage. Most of them are, you know, they're not cleaning out their cages. They're just putting animals in whatever, you know, and then I think the tree monitors pick it up, and then they have this fungus, you know, because I don't think they're getting it from the wild, you know.
Well, you know what? I mean, sure they are. There's lots of forms of fungus in the wild and stuff, but you got to remember, in the environment in which these things have evolved in, they've also evolved strategies to help combat the diseases and parasites and fungi in that environment, right? But when you know, if you have an importer that had a group of Uromastics in a cattle trough, right? Like, let's say you get, you know, one of these importers in the US that, you know, goes through animals. It's like a revolving door of animals, right? And they'll use like a cattle trough for a bunch of Uromastics, right? you know, those Sahara neuromastics are going to be carrying different diseases and parasites and fungi than what a tree monitor from Indonesia would experience.
Yeah.
So if you get rid of all those neuromastics and then you dump some tree monitors in that trough or enclosure or whatever, now they're exposed to those spores. And they haven't evolved to deal with that nonsense. That's why it affects them so bad, right? Like you and I have parasites. We're exposed to crap all the time. But we've also evolved in the setting where our body knows how to handle it, right? I mean, I always use the same thing. It's like, you know, when Europeans came to North America, right? It was like the biggest cause of death in the indigenous populations in North and South America was disease that we introduced that we lived with, no problem, right? The common cold and flu. It killed all the indigenous people, but because they'd never been exposed to it before. It's the same with monitor lizards and like these importers and stuff. So it's like, it is a gamble, because if you get an animal that was in an enclosure that had something with yellow fungus in it, I mean, that is very aggressive. You could lose your animal within a couple weeks after getting it.
Put into quarantine.
Yeah, quarantine. You're gonna lose that animal. It's like a roll of the dice, right? So it's like, this is from a personal perspective. When I used to look back at importing stuff, I was like, I would rather get it direct from Indonesia myself, right? Because at least I know it's been with other Indonesian animals, and you know, there's going to be some uniformity in the parasite loads. I mean, yeah, sure, they come from different islands and populations and stuff, but you know, you're really narrowing that spectrum of what can really get them. But if you buy it from an importer, let's say in the United States, that gets things from Asia, Africa, South America, and they've all been in the same enclosures, it's like, good luck. You're really rolling the dice, because if that tree monitor picks up something that South American tegu had, right? The tegu might live with it fine, but the tree monitor, it's a death sentence, right? So that's like the risk of it, you know, big time. So anyways, but
yeah. So I'm trying to think what else we could cover with the wild caught acclimation, because we've talked about.
I think we're good. I think we're good on that.
Do you want to go to the Q&A? The Q&A?
There was just some people. Ben messaged me earlier today, and he was just like, just a standard question, enclosure size, right? So for tree monitors. Now, we can answer this very quickly.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. This has been covered, but I'll just answer it for him. You know, the bigger the better. And what I've learned, you know, like the bare minimum for one would be like a 4x2x4, right? For if you're housing one, sort of thing. And you know, they seem to get away with that, but obviously it's not ideal. If you're like on a commercial setting and you have to optimize space, right? Then, you know, you can be more concerned with being efficient. But if you have your, you know, you're just putting a monitor in your living room and a nice display tank, then you can go way bigger. One of the recommendations and one of the things that I've learned over the years, or that at least I've observed, is that, you know, the tree monitor species that I work with all of them, but through my observations, when you watch them, if you have a 4 foot tall enclosure or a 5 foot tall enclosure or a 6 foot tall enclosure, they're always going to be in the upper third of the enclosure, right? That's what I find. They'll go down to the floor to grab crickets and stuff, but when they're just hanging out, they're always up top. So if my recommendation now is like, I wouldn't do an 8 foot tall enclosure. I just wouldn't. I don't know why, but some people swear by it. I wouldn't. What I would do is you could get away with a 4 foot tall enclosure, but I think that you would be much better off having a greater length than greater height. That's me.
Yeah. Matt says that too. Reptile Revolt.
Yeah.
You know, he says the same thing. Like he switched his cages to be longer rather than taller.
If I were to revamp everything in my shop, I would make my cages longer rather than taller. You know, just because that would be a way to effectively optimize the space within the enclosure, but give them more room than they have now, because I just find that they don't use the height, right? They're a tree monitor, but they're going to find their optimal temperature range and their UV range and all of that stuff. And it seems with our typical setups indoors, it's like we're setting that what they find in the canopy is what we can provide for them right there at 4 foot high. So if you want to give them running room, give them the depth and give them the length rather than the height. And I think that's a way better situation for them. That's what I gathered to this time.
I just keep mine how they are because I've been doing it for years and it works.
Well,
so I do the 6 by 4 by 2. Yeah. But they like it and they'll go to the bottom if I put stuff in the bottom.
Right.
Like if I take the leaves from outside, in fall and I'll throw it in there and then they're all like, especially the males like the scent mark. But also I have superworms. I have superworms and stuff that live in the substrate. So they'll go down there and like maybe nose around a little bit. They don't really dig it out, but they'll,
By all means, like I said, the bigger the better. If you have the space for it and you're not worried about like optimizing space in a facility, build them a 12-foot tall enclosure.
If I could, I would. I think that would be super cool.
Like my crocodile monitors.
Yeah.
They're the same. I built them like the big monitors of their own facility, basically. So my crocodile monitor enclosure is like 12 feet tall. They never come down to the ground, but it is what it is. They have the option anyways, right?
Yeah, at least they have the option.
Yeah. I'm not breeding croc monitors on a commercial scale where I have to worry about optimizing space, right? I'm giving these bloody things as much space as I possibly can because they're so big and so smart. So yeah, that's what I would say about enclosure space. The depth and the length is probably more important than the height. Obviously, you don't want it to only be 2 feet tall, but if
I wouldn't do that.
I think 4 feet tall is ideal, in my opinion. And again, when I designed all my cages and stuff, I wasn't at the level of knowledge that I am now, and you weren't either with yours, right? So if I could do it over again, I would make them longer rather than taller. But it is what it is for me now. And I'm, when I start to, if I ever move or I start to like revamp, then I'll start building the enclosures in that style. Right. But
there you go.
Yeah. The way I have it now works. I just find that there's a lot of underutilized space when you get to the bottom of the enclosure. So you could chop off the bottom, but add the extra length to it. And I think they'd be much better off. Right. So, yeah.
All right, next question.
Alex wants to know about incubation. This is another one that's been covered to death. But here's my rule about incubation. If your eggs are deflating, then it means you need to hydrate them a little bit more, add a little more humidity to the box. It's all humidity driven, right? So you have to make sure the egg box is humid. If your eggs are swelled up and they look like ping pong balls, like big round or spherical orbs, then they're too hydrated, right? So you have to regulate. But incubation is a tough one because none of us can give you a perfect answer about incubation, right? Temperature
we all do it a little different.
Temperature standard. Everybody's cooking them at 85 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, fine. And that's like most monitors. Most monitors you do 85.
Right. So. But incubation in terms of humidity, that's different because everybody's incubator is different. Everybody humidity is going to fluctuate depending on your incubator, depending on where you live, depending on the number of eggs you have in your incubator. The more egg boxes you have in there, the more humid it's going to be. So there's all those factors. So the only way to really truly gauge it is to look at your eggs, and if they're nice and elliptical but holding shape, then they're good. If they're dimpling, then they're just not humid enough. If they're swelled up like ping pong balls, then it's too humid. Dry out the substrate a little bit, right? Everybody's doing the suspension method now. So it's all about the relative air humidity in that box, right?
You just got to do the trial and error. You know what I mean? Find out what works for you. Dude, it took me like a few times before I could figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, it is. It's like, it is difficult to figure out what works for you, right? Everybody's been there. One of the things I will say is like people that have their nice homemade incubators made of like bar fridges and refrigerators and stuff like that, those are the best damn ones. The people that spend like, the people that spend like, $3,000 on this professional grade incubator that has 1 million fans in it and like can cool and heat and do all this stuff, their eggs always go bad. Like they're, you know what I mean? It's just like, I swear to God, I'm going to do a tutorial on how to build your own incubator. I have to do this.
How about you do the tutorial and I will build it as you're telling me how to build it.
Catherine, I've heard your stories about building enclosures. I don't know about that. Like I will literally do a tutorial on how to convert a refrigerator or a bar fridge to a perfect monitor incubator. Like
you should do it.
Oh, I will, because my incubator, my primary monitor incubator is an old refrigerator from like 1970. It's green, so it's fitting for lizards. And it's the simplest setup on the inside. I mean, damn, if I told people that I still have a Helix thermostat in that thing, they would laugh because that's like a thermostat from like the late 90s.
Yeah.
It works. And I will not change. People are like, why don't you get this incubator from whatever? It's like, you know, a cool. I was like, no, because this thing works, right? And it holds humidity great, and I don't have to mess with it. There's, you know, keep it simple, along with everything else in the monitor game. Keep it simple, and it'll work out. The more you try to overcomplicate crap by doing this, that, and the other thing, there's too many variables to go wrong, right? Eliminate all the stupid variables and everything, and you'll be way better off. That's what I find. But yeah. Like in terms of incubation, that's the best advice. Just look at your eggs. And if you have a question like, hey, does this egg look good? Show me a picture and I'll tell you. Yeah. I know I've walked a lot of people through, okay, just leave it. Don't cut it. Right. Oh, my egg's dimpling before, you know, like, before somebody just messaged me the other day and I was like, oh, this egg is dimpling. And, they're supposed to like hatch in like a week or something like that. And I was like, okay. I said, well, you don't want it to dehydrate anymore. So I would just take the substrate there and add, you know, depending on the size of your container, this is what I would do. I would add 30 milliliters or 30 grams of water in there just to give it a little bump in humidity, right? Now, go like, oh, I heard you could drown the eggs. It's like, yeah, you could if it was already turgid, but you're not going to overhydrate that. That egg may or may not bounce out. I find later on in incubation, they don't rehydrate very well. But if you increase the humidity, it will keep it from dehydrating further. And what you don't want to happen is for that egg to lose so much moisture from dimpling that the yolk inside solidifies. And then the embryo's dead, or the baby's dead in there, right? So I said, at this point in the incubation, if it's dimpled, add a bit of water to the substrate. And if it bounces back out, great. You can remix the substrate to a little drier so it doesn't overhydrate. But likelihood is it won't bounce back out. You just want to keep it from dehydrating any further. So, you know, there's little things like that. You know, dimpling's not a problem. Like everybody's like, oh, my egg's dimpled. No. That's fine, right? Just add a little bit of water to the substrate, give it 2 weeks and it'll be fine, right? Usually the eggs won't rehydrate if it's already dead. That's the problem, right? Like, so, and then like at the end of incubation, you know, people are like, oh, my eggs are at 150 days. Should I cut them? No. Your incubator is different than my incubator. Sometimes I have them go to 175 days, sometimes 148, right? If you cut them too early, that's a death sentence too, right? So, and I mean, if I was a customer, I wouldn't want to be buying monitors that I knew were cut out of the egg, right? Like I just wouldn't. So, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do. If incubation was reasonably done well, they're going to hatch. If they're healthy, they're going to hatch, right? So that's what I would say about incubation.
Yeah.
What do you think? Anything to add?
No, you pretty much said it all.
Let me just go to these questions there were some funny ones on Instagram. Somebody messaged me. Incubation. Oh, okay. Somebody asked me about hybridization. So there was 2 questions about hybridization. somebody asked me specifically about pilbarensis and if they thought that the animals that we have in North America, Europe, and the United States are crosses or hybridizations or hybrids between pilbarensis and Hamerliensis, right? And the short answer to that is like, I have no idea. I don't know, right? My rationale to that is like the original group of the pilbarensis that came from Germany probably in the 90s to Frank Reedus and Joe Louis from Rare Earth. Whoever got those animals first off maybe started with a group of 4, 5, 6, I don't know, probably all collected in the same locality. So I would assume they're all the same species, right? And that's what's proliferated all of those animals here in captivity, right? Hamerliensis was discovered, 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. So the likelihood that pilbarensis in captivity are hybridized with them, I doubt it. So I don't know if Hamerliensis are in captivity at all, or if they've just been described as, I'm sure they are somewhere, but if they've just been described as a new subspecies or species in the wilds of Australia. So, when it comes to hybridization of Odatria, right? It's like such a gray area, man. And things get changed all the time, right? Before, red and yellow Ackies used to be 2 different subspecies, right? Like Acantherus and Acantherus brachioris for the yellows. And then they just decided like, they're probably just locality differences. Yep. They're all the same species now. So, I mean, I still keep, for my own sake, I'll keep the localities pure. So I'll say reds are reds, yellows are yellows. The Tristis orientalis complex now with the 3 new species they described. It's like, who knows? Whoa.
Yeah, Kiwi wants to come out. Kiwi is like super friendly. And she sees me over here, so she wants me to take her out and play with her. But if I were to do that, she'd probably jump all over the computer and probably kick us out of the podcast.
Yeah. But so like that was the muddy waters of like Tristis versus Tristis orientalis years ago, was like, oh, that's not a pure Tristis. That's not a pure Tristis orientalis, right? And unfortunately, in captivity, there's no good records of like who did what with what back in the day. So there's probably a lot of muddy water for those, and even like, I'm not going to mention names, but like back in the day, there were breeders that would try and cross Kimberleys and Pilbaras, and it worked. I mean, they produced babies. I think they called them Kimbaras or something that, right? And Caudaliniatus and Gillani, right? Somebody has one male of one species but has a female of another. Their natural inclination is to like cross them. So they crossed Caudaliniatus with Gillani and produced Caudellini, I think they called them, right? And like these were big time breeders back in the day that did this too, right? So but I don't know if they tried to second generation any of those animals, like whether they were fertile or not. They probably were, I would imagine, but I don't know for sure, right? And I'm sure we're going to see it with tree monitors too, as
we've already seen the different hybrids, people making the hybrids and everything.
Yeah, but usually it's not really known. You know what I mean? Like people do it on the DL.
Because people, they keep it on the DL because, they know everybody's gonna bash them and be like, "Oh my god!" But I don't know. It happens. I've seen all the different mixes. I think pretty much now. I've seen blue and yellow, Cordensis in blue, Cordensis in green, black and green, blue and green. What else? What have you seen with the trees?
I don't get. I think people think that I'll judge them if they show me these pictures, but I don't see a lot of it. Right? I've seen like a blue and a Cordensis. I've seen a black and a green. I think that might be it. And I'll be honest. I don't think any of the hybrids are as nice as either of the original species. So, I mean, for me, there would be no incentive to do it. I mean, I haven't like, you know, I've never crossed a black and a yellow to try and make something that looks like a Bohmii, right? Like I've never done that. I'd be curious to see what happens, but I don't want to be the first guy to do that, right? Because you know where that will go, right? So I almost did that once. I put a male yellow tree monitor in the wrong enclosure. Like I had added an enclosure to the end of the row, so my mind was like, you know, the end enclosure was Bohmii, the second last enclosure was a solo female black tree monitor, and then I had a pair of yellow tree monitors beside that. But I had just added the Bohmii enclosure on the end, so I pulled the male out to do something with it, and then just not even thinking, I put it back in the second enclosure. But now the second enclosure was the solo black female, not the pair of yellows, right? And I didn't realize until the next day. I did this in the evening, so there was like maybe a couple hours of light left on in the enclosures. The next day I go back in there at around noon because it's like feeding time, and I see the male yellow. The male yellow is locked with the female black on the wall. So I right away pulled him out because I didn't want to do that. It was like, again, it was just a lapse in what I was thinking at the time. Put the male back with his female, and right away put a male with that female because clearly she was cycling. And then the male black locked with the female black for like the course of a week. And I was like, when I got that clutch of eggs and then incubated them, I was like, what's going on?
You're like,
they were all straight up Bakari. So,
that's good.
But I was just like, yeah, it's not something that I wanted to do. I told a few guys that I was close with in the hobby, like, man, this just happened to me. And they're like, oh shit. Right. But you know, stuff like that. But I'm not like intentionally doing crosses. I mean, I'm curious to see what some of them would look like.
I'll have to send you some pictures. I'll have to dig them up and send them to you, because I did save pictures of them all somewhere on the interweb.
On the Google. What else? What other questions does people have? We talked about monitor groups first time. Oh yeah, it was socialization. Anyway, let's just cover that. Good old Mike Roma was asking me about what was it like to try and breed monitors back in the day. Maybe we'll end with this because
we're so old from the Stone Age.
Right, we're already we're an hour or 40 minutes into this, but we'll end with this. Thanks a lot, Mike, because when I see a question like that, I feel like I'm like the monitor senior citizen now. I still feel young, but now you guys are questioning me like I'm some old dude that's been around like Tom Crutchfield or something forever, right? But what's it like? I'll tell you. I bred my first monitors in 1998. That was when Ackies like came back on the scene, right? And there was no such thing as like an enclosure like we have them today. It was all in aquariums, right? I don't know if you remember this, but everything was in aquariums.
Or you know what? I had the old glass jewelry showcase.
Yeah.
Let me find it at a yard sale.
I remember when I think I was in grade 10, I got my first lizards, and they were veiled chameleons. I would have been 15 at the time. And the best lizard enclosure at the time was an aquarium with an angled front, and it was called the Lizard Lounge. And it had like vents on it and stuff, like vents in the glass. And it worked fine. I mean, I bred the chameleons in it. It was fine. But like by the time a couple of years fast, I bred the chameleons, used that money to buy some Ackies and stuff. So when I first started breeding Ackies, it was literally like I had I think it was 100-gallon aquarium. But at that time, you didn't have to just buy a fish aquarium. They actually made aquaria for reptiles, right? So with the thin gauge glass, so it didn't weigh like 2,000 pounds. And that's the first thing I bred Ackies in. It was like a big ant farm because I had 12 inches of sand or dirt in there, and the Ackies would dig down. And if you covered up the glass, you could see the tunnels that they built through, just like an ant farm. It was actually kind of funny. But we bred them in that, and like, I don't know if you remember back then, but like there was no such thing as UV lighting. Like I remember reading some of those old Reptiles magazines, and that was when Zoo Med first came out. And UV lighting, like I forget the percentage UV they actually emitted, but they used the T12 bulbs, which were the big fat, like elementary school fluorescent tubes, right? Like those big ones. And they were not high output. They were not very efficient. So the amount of UV you got from those things back in the day was probably very minimal. And it was to the point where like guys like Frank read us online, like, yeah, UV, you don't need it or whatever, right? And there was something to that back in the day because those UV lights were so poor quality anyways, right? Like Zoom Ed was the only company that had one of them. So I was like, I remember breeding Ackies with a spotlight, but like the sophisticated breeders at that time, like the chameleon breeders that really wanted UV, they were all using marijuana grow lights. They like sodium halide lights and everything like that. So they were, you know, and you would read about that stuff and like that was at the start of the internet too. So there wasn't even a good groups and forums and stuff. But things you would read in Reptiles magazine, or if you had, you know, you weren't on dial up and you could like get into like some sort of group or find something on Google. But a lot of the breeders would use, like chameleon guys especially, and day gecko guys, I remember they would use the like sodium halide lights, the same grow lights that marijuana growers would use, right? And it worked for them because they were higher UV output and stuff. So but yeah, like breeding that stuff back in the day.
And the supplements, do you remember? There were no supplements. You know, this guy at the pet store told me, he goes, yeah, you have to give your reptiles supplements, but he would tell me to get human supplements. So like calcium. And I would buy the multivitamins, like the Flintstone vitamins, and take pieces off, and I'd have to put it in a dead mouse and give it to the reptiles, you know, the monitor lizards. Yeah. And, you know, they didn't have the frozen thawed back then, so I'd have to kill it myself. And like, I just remember like being so traumatized. So because I used to keep mice and rats as pets. So, but I really love my monitor lizards too. And like, I wanted to give them vitamins, you know, that's what you were supposed to do. So like, I remember the guy at the pet store, he's like, he goes, this is what you do if you want to do it really quick and painless. You have to take it and just knock. And I was like, oh my God. Never.
Yeah. Well, you know. But like
that's how it was back in the day. The struggle was real.
Yeah, like honestly, if you had a monitor lizard that was big enough to be eating whole prey like mice or birds or whatever, then you were probably good for calcium and vitamin D.
But I didn't know. I was
I know. You know? But like if you're
doing as a teenager, doing what the pet store guy.
But if you were a reptile person that had insect eating reptiles, right, they're not very high in calcium and they're not high in D3, so you had to supplement that because they weren't getting any UV in those old enclosures. So I can literally remember doing the same thing. I would go to the drugstore, and up here they had this like liquid vitamin D. I think it was called like Sun Drops or something. Liquid, and you could put drops of that vitamin D on food or in food or whatever, and then you could get like human calcium carbonate or calcium gluconate or whatever it was, any form of calcium, right? So I would supplement with that stuff, right? Especially like insect eating reptiles. But
the iguanas too. I had an iguana I would have to give human, you know, calcium and stuff for too. And I remember building a cage for mine in shop class.
I still do that. Like for the New Caledonian geckos, right? Especially like Chihuahua. You know, if they're breeding, and you're just feeding them like Rapashi or Pangea or something like that, and they're breeding heavily, they'll get like wavy tails and they'll get calcium depleted. So with those guys, I'll just go to the drugstore now, like where I am, they can buy what they call a Life brand liquid calcium, and it's liquid calcium and vitamin D in that, and it tastes like grapes. So I'll just take, like when I'm mixing up a batch of like Pangea, I'll just take a teaspoon of that and put it in there and mix it all in. I've never seen any deficiencies that way, but that's what we had to do back in the day, right? Like we had to do stuff like that. Like when I started breeding Kimberleys and Pilbaras, Kimberleys, especially like when I first started hatching them, and like babies, like back at that time, there was no the calcium supplements were Reptile. It came in that white bottle with the pink label.
Yep.
And then there was like Herptivite. It came in the white, short white bottle with the blue label.
Blue,
Those were two, and they were junk. Like it was just junk. And you'd see like tail kinks and baby Kimberleys. So you know what? Like it sounds awful, but what I used to do is when I started breeding Kimberleys, I started breeding my own mice, and I would take pinky mice, right? I'd kill the pinky mice, and then I'd take like a magic bullet blender. This is gross. But it's
ew, oh my God. I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So I would take some of those mice, those pinky mice, put them in there, put a little bit of water in there. And then I would also put some of those vitamin D drops and then some liquid calcium in there and make like a smoothie.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you, but it was like because UV lights weren't a thing, right? They weren't a thing, right? They just were not a
smoothie.
Yeah. So then I would just like, you'd have your like enclosure with baby Kims in it, and I'd put like a bottle cap in there with a dollop of this smoothie in it, or I just do a dollop of it on the rocks. And I'm telling you, baby Kims and Pubs would love it. They would drink it up. They'd eat every last bit of it.
God.
But it eliminated the problems. It was a necessary evil to do that. I mean, there's no difference between taking a frozen thawed pinky, blending it up, and just feeding the frozen thawed pinky.
Yeah. I think the whole blending it up is the thing that's gross.
I will say at that time I was living with my parents, and I still did have a dedicated magic bullet just for that. I never used like my
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Like, oh my God. It's so terrible.
Imagine
what's
this paw in the blender.
Yeah. Ew.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing back in the day was that like there was no success, right? Like what Mike asked, like it was very hard. There was very few people succeeding breeding anything, and you really had to think outside the box to do well with it because the technology just wasn't there, right? And even like Mike in his question asked, like, what was the technology like? And then he's like, what was it like? Like, what were imports like back in the 90s? Right. And it's like, honestly, it was like the Wild West. And I mean, I was young, so I didn't know the import game and stuff. But when I started, this is kind of when I noticed what was going on. When I started breeding Ackies and had a bunch of veiled chameleons and frilled lizards going and stuff, I had to have an avenue to sell them. So the pet stores that I would go to, they would give me their contacts for the distributors that would sell them animals, right? So the guys in Canada that would actually do an import from Indonesia and then sell to the stores. And I remember this was the first time I saw this, and it was so disgusting. I was not into tree monitors at the time, but I remember this specifically because this guy wanted some Ackies. So I had a bunch of baby Ackies I was going to sell him, and he was doing his delivery route, and he came through my hometown. And he's like, I'll meet you at this store at this time. I'm like, a kid. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Right. So I bring him the Ackies he wants, and he's in this like van. It's just like a cargo van. And he has all of the animals that he imported, and he's bringing them to the stores to sell them. And he's like, you're into monitors, right? And I'm like, yeah, man, I love monitors. I have my Ackies. They're amazing. And he's like, you want some black tree monitors? And I'm like, what are they? Right. And he opened, I remember he opened up this, like, I remember this, he opened up this, it was just like a Rubbermaid sweater box. I had to have like 20 black tree monitors in there. Oh, so bad. It was so bad. I mean, at the time I was like not interested. I didn't even know what they were. I was like, oh yeah, they look dead. I don't know, but that's what it was like. It was like, the thing was, it was like those animals back in the day, like an Indo priceless back then is not like an Indo priceless now. Like back in the day, you could buy those black tree monitors wholesale for like $50 probably.
Yeah.
They were getting them for pennies on the dollar from Indonesia. I mean, they were probably paying $15 a black tree monitor or something back then. They'd bring in hundreds of them. It wasn't even regulated. I don't even know if Indo had quotas back then. It wasn't regulated. And it was like, if half of them died, it was no big deal because they still made their money, right? It was sickening. It's actually a good system they have going now, because it really forces people to like take care of the animals and stuff, right? And regulate it more. But back then it was like the Wild West. You could get whatever you wanted, like literally whatever you wanted. And that's like, I mean, from my perspective, that's not that long ago. I can't imagine what it was like in the 80s or 70s. Like you get whatever the hell you wanted, you know? So yeah, that's kind of in terms of technology and stuff, like there were no mist systems. There was no high output UV lighting, LED lights. There were no like PVC enclosures. There was nothing like that. This is why to this day, I still build all of my own, because I was like, if I want to house this thing properly, at the time, I couldn't buy anything commercial, right? And it was like, okay, I'm going to have to build it. I'll build it out of plywood. So I like learned how to woodwork. And then it's like, okay, I want to hook up lights in there. I learned how to do. My dad, you know, he was an electrician. So he's like, okay, this is how you hook up this UV light fixture and this spotlight fixture in parallel so that you only have one plug coming out the back. And, you know, he taught me how to do that. And I still do that stuff to this day, because it worked for me and I am not changing, right? And I feel that I can just build my stuff.
It works, you know, like.
Yeah. So, you know, like that sort of stuff. But that's what it was like. You really, like, you had to be a jack of all trades to be somewhat successful back in the day, right? If you wanted to provide proper care for them, like if you could keep them outside, like the southern guys in the southern states and stuff, that was a bit different, right? Like, like Tom Crutchfield, you know, he's always been able to successfully keep tree monitors because he had the luxury of keeping them outside and stuff, which nature did a bit of the work. I mean, there's problems with keeping them outside too, but in terms of like UV and vitamins and, you know, that sort of thing, it's like you had a better base there to start, right? But there's other problems with keeping stuff outside. But like where I grew up in Canada, it's like, God damn, right? I'd be lucky if I could keep monitor lizards outside for, you know, a month of the year at best. So that was it. So you had to kind of work around all that. But now, I mean, there are a lot of commercial products out there that are really good. Obviously, I've upgraded all my lighting systems to T5 UV lights, and you know, I don't trust LED yet because I just still feel it's too new and whatever. But, I've seen some funny things with it in behavior, so I don't use that. But I mean, my setups are still very, very simple in terms of the technology that's available versus what I actually use.
Yeah.
Right. I like to keep it simple that way. But,
well, we are going to have a guest on to talk about lighting in one of these episodes. I got to tell you about that, Brandon. Remind me. I got to tell you about when they're coming on. Anyway, we're getting a guest on. One of our guest speakers is going to be someone who is an expert in UV lighting, and they'll be able to tell us what, you know, all the different types of lights and all of that stuff. So maybe it'll put your mind at ease, or maybe it won't, Brandon. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what he says.
You know what? I've been, you know, I've been doing this so long now. There's all, like, you know, there's all sorts, even like clinical research and stuff that comes out, or lab research, or opinions and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, so I'm like a results-based person. I'm like, if it's working for me, then I'm not inclined to say I'm doing anything wrong. You know what I mean? Like if they're breeding, they've been living for 15 years and they're still breeding and doing everything they should be. And it's like, you could tell me that this is the next best thing and you got to be doing this. And it's like, nah, I don't care. That's just cool, right? But it's like, what, you know, I don't know if I could get a tree monitor to be more productive than laying a clutch of eggs every 3 months, regardless of what I do.
Yeah, that's,
you know,
that's
like,
very,
you know, it's just like, I don't know if I'd want to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That even seems excessive given the size of the eggs relative to their body and how
I agree. Yeah.
So, you know, it's just like, there's lots of new stuff coming out every day, enclosure wise, system wise, supplementation wise, lighting wise. It's like, you could drive yourself nuts. I think that's part of the problem too, is like people really, really overcomplicate their setups, and they just create so many variables that they have to control that it's just impossible, right?
Yeah.
You know, have your good spotlight, have your good decent UV light, have well gut loaded and healthy prey items, and you know, if your temperatures are within range and they have a cool enough spot that they can escape the heat from, and they have a warm enough spot where they could bask, get warm in a period of like 15 to 20 minutes and then take off, you're golden. You're good. They'll breed.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we are getting an hour and 58 minutes. Oh my gosh.
Told you. I told you.
You did. Oh my gosh. We're like, oh yeah, we can fill up an hour, you know, twice of that.
I know.
All right. Well, yeah, well, I should probably get going. I'm sure you got to get back to your living the dream life right now at the cabin on the lake. Oh, so jealous.
I know. This is like prime. This is like, what is it? It's 8:45 p.m. where I am right now. And it's like the prime time fishing. And I'm giving it up just to do it.
Oh, well, see, everyone watching or listening, you should feel honored.
I could be out there right now catching a 48, 50-inch muskie on this. Hold on. Let's see.
Yeah.
On this beautiful lake.
Yeah, so pretty.
They're calling my name, but I'd much rather be talking monitors.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I guess we will get off here, and I don't know when we're doing the next podcast, but look out for the posts. You know, maybe we'll do another Q&A again at some point.
You know, I have asked like a few people to do podcasts, and like guys that have some experience now, and they seem to be having some good results. And it's just, you know, even like in different countries like the UK and stuff, and there's a lot of people that are afraid or intimidated to do a podcast. They're like nervous about it. Like, no, it's just fun. We just shoot the shit. It's all good, right? Don't worry about it. So
I get that too.
If you're watching, it's not that bad.
Oh no, we're just talking monitors.
Yeah.
Coolest thing to talk about.
I've been, you know, plugging guys. I'm like, come on, man. Everybody wants to hear from you. I want to hear from you. You have a great accent too. Like, it'd be great.
Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, they're like, oh, I don't think I'm qualified, you know, but yet they're breeding and doing all these great things, but just shy or
I think that's a problem with the community in general, right? That's why a lot of people don't say stuff online, is because they think if they have an opinion or they say something that people are going to bash them, right?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I'm like, everybody's like, I mean, if you have tree monitors and whatever you're doing, or you have monitor lizards and whatever, however you're keeping them and whatever you're doing is working, and you're producing babies and you're hatching them with some consistency, then you have a valid opinion about stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like the guys that try and come on that have never done anything but tell you everything you're doing is wrong. Like, who cares? Just remember this, like, you know, nobody doing better than you is ever going to criticize you. It's always the people doing worse that try and, you know, push you off your pedestal and rock your boat and criticize you. That's the truth in life in general, right? So whatever people say, just whatever, you know.
That is true.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we're going to end things. And if you liked this podcast, don't forget to click on the like and subscribe button and press the notification bell so that you can be informed of the next time that we have a podcast up. We'll probably do another one, I guess, in 2 weeks. And not sure if it's going to be another pre-recorded one or if it's a live one. That depends on, you know, everybody's busy schedules. But yeah, if you have questions about it, you can message either me or Brandon. And anyway, hope everyone has a great weekend. Till next time.
See you later.
Bye, Brandon.